Good evening. Welcome to the January 26th board meeting of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. I'll call this meeting to order. All members are present. However, we have Manager Maxwell virtually, Manager Olson virtually. However, he will not be voting or participating, just observing. And President White, virtual observation as well, not participating and not voting. If that makes sense. All right. Any matters from the floor? Anyone? All right, moving on. Approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion? Thank you. Second for anyone?
Second.
All right. We get to do roll call for our virtual hybrid meeting here. Manager Maxwell, how do you vote on the approval of the agenda?
Aye.
Thank you. Manager Hejmadi?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Sando?
Aye.
And Loftus, I vote aye. We have no information items. We'll look at our consent agenda next. It has approval of the minutes, approval of check registers, and an authorization to renew our Metro Watershed Partnerships membership. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And roll call, Manager Hejmadi.
Present.
I'm sorry.
What do you want?
Roll call as far as the vote
Oh, aye.
on the consent
Aye.
agenda.
Aye.
Thank you. Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Miller,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Loftus, I vote aye. And our regular agenda, we'll start with board updates. President White will give us a report at the next meeting. And then moving on to our PPC committee meeting tonight, Manager Miller.
I convened it and adjourned it, and that was my only participation in the meeting. It was handled very well by Manager Loftus, which was a preparation for our board retreat and engagement of the staff and the board in the planning process. I want to thank Samantha and Manager Loftus for a well-run meeting with a lot of activities that brought out everybody's participation.
Great, yeah, I'd like to thank Samantha Mall as well. She did a great job, thank you. Any other board updates? Okay, we have no public hearings, nor any permits, so we'll move on to action items. We have a resolution to authorize to amend the Phase 2 design contract with HDR for 325 Blake Road restoration and redevelopment to include structural engineering services. And this will be presented by Mr. Sherman.
Good evening, Board of Managers. I'm happy to be here with you. It's been a while since I presented in person. So this evening we do have a request for an amendment to the Phase 2 design contract with HDR to add structural engineering services. And I also do want to take this opportunity to run over some pergola pavement options. The action will just be taken on the amendment, but this is a related design feature, and the timing is right to have this discussion as we're kind of buttoning up 100% design and moving towards bidding. So then we'll, just to try to keep things relatively orderly, I'll present both of those, but then we've divided up the discussion and question portion by each item so that it just remains clear that action is only being taken on the amendment and the rest is more of guidance to staff. And then I'll take just a few minutes to kind of at the top of the presentation, just refresh everyone where we're at with the overall design process and then conclude with a few brief next steps before board takes action. So this is the familiar design process diagram that we've been presenting back since 2021. We continue to move along this design process that we had laid out, again, dual process with tracking along with the development with the lattice. I've updated in green here where items have been adjusted since this particular diagram was last presented. Mostly you'll notice, even though we continue to track along as planned, we are getting close to like a year out from what we had initially planned on for potential project bidding. Think about 6 months ago, we were predicting that we could be moving closer to this winter. And just where we're getting indications from where Lattice is at with their next potential purchase, we sort of opted to take a brief pause at 90% design to allow them to catch up a little bit, making sure that we really understood that eastern edge of the Lattice development and the western edge of our development, and making sure that we weren't finalizing all of our details before we had some stronger indication that things would move on together. The other thing you'll notice here is I've updated where it says coordinated construction phasing. That did previously say possibly joint construction phasing or joint construction. Clearly with building A moving forward on Lattice, they've already selected a general contractor. So we're no longer considering bidding our portion of the project out with them, but there will still be the need for lots of coordination. So I've sort of updated that just to reflect that we're in a more communicative footing right now rather than a joint bidding process. Our general strategy has been now to advance to 100% design. That's kind of what you'll see this amendment is getting at this evening. While Lattice remains somewhat in flux as to their exact timing, our goal is now to get to 100% design, and we can be really nimble and go out to bid kind of at a moment's notice once we have our construction documents in hand. And we think that's just a stronger position to be in, so we're not waiting around at 90% and then potentially taking a couple of months to get there. So, we can take advantage if we do think there's any sort of favorable bid climate that we could try to hit, or just stay, make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our own project and not trying to stay ahead or stay behind of a Lattice anymore. And then finally, there's going to be a construction administration piece. That's a separate contract that once we have a better idea of when we're going out to bid, that we'll scope up. And given just the high degree of coordination that we're planning on with the Lattice, I do imagine there's going to be a task in there that would allow for that coordination to occur. And then finally, once the project is actually built, of course, there's operations and maintenance. We're currently working on a joint operations and maintenance plan with City of Hopkins. And as a condition to close for Lattice, there's going to be reciprocal easement and operating agreements put in place, and that will be where we address those maintenance items with them. So as part of getting to 100%, we're going through finalizing all of the construction details to make sure that they can be permitted, as well as obviously constructed and be safe for use. A particular item that's come up, just because it's a larger structure on the site, is the pergola, which has been an ongoing discussion between the board and staff and the design liaisons and landscape architects. And the goal for the gateway parcel has always been to create something that was visually unique and visible from the road to passing motorists, something that kind of brands the site as Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And early on, there was a range of ideas for what could go here. A public art piece was talked about, either driven by the Watershed District or in cooperation with Hopkins. We had talked about a large water feature as a potential for here. Ultimately, the board decided that a pergola that branded Minnehaha Creek and was reoriented to face Minnehaha Creek really made the most sense here. And that'll be complemented by some unique paving underneath the pergola structure with an outline or some sort of depiction of the watershed, and then native plantings in the oval behind it. Part of that reorientation was just recognizing that we're really trying to celebrate the creek here and moving away from Blake Road where there's traffic noise. And also having those sort of unique swing bench features face the rest of Codgerville Park, which is at this point well established, and it itself is kind of a nice focal point. Because this is a custom design for the pergola, given its size, it is considered a building structure. It'll have to be permitted by the City of Hopkins. Our design team noted that it would be necessary to conduct a structural engineering review of this structure. And just for the board's kind of context, out at Wasserman, we did something similar for structures out there to make sure that they're constructible and safe once they are in use. So we've had HDR put together a brief scope of work for what that would entail. They've broken it down into 3 different tasks: a structural analysis, which is basically building out a digital model of the structure to analyze loads and to size all of the different metal members. Construction detail development, which is looking really at those connections between all of the pieces. And then a drawing review, and that's sort of going back and forth between HDR's engineers and then the landscape architects who have come up with sort of the aesthetics of it, but making sure that it's the construction drawings are reflecting HDR's engineering review. And so you can see here the budget breakdown for each of these. Attached to the memo was the associated number of hours that HDR intends to spend on each of these subtasks, and the total budget to conduct this analysis would be $15,800. No contingency. This is just a not to exceed amount. So again, this is going to be the action that the board is taking this evening. We would treat this as an additional amendment to the design contract. The previous amendment was to extend it to a phase 2, so we would just add this on to the existing contract.
I'm a little confused. I understand complexity of the integration of 2 different construction projects, the private development and ours on the 325 site, and I understand that separate. And then I'd call it the Children's Park north of Lake or south of Lake is a separate deal, but that's dependent on building the bridge and all that, I suppose. What's the time frame on this?
So as we currently have it laid out, we are producing a single bid package that would go out altogether. We do obviously have the ability, if we are, in another couple months, if we're getting signs that, we're getting impatient that the rest of the development isn't moving ahead, we could work with HDR to break this component out to be bid separately, but that would be, that'd probably be another contract amendment to basically pull this into a separate plan set that could be bid ready on its own. So the timeline right now is probably, we're ready to go as soon as, next month. We would have a package that's constructible. we're probably looking closer to the end of spring or early summer until we'd have certainty on a lattice moving forward and moving forward with the rest of our project.
My position is, this is a separate project, and it's the completion of Cottageville Park rather than, 325.
Yep.
And I'd want to move ahead on this project regardless of the delay that may occur on Lattice's project, so that we can get it up and done, and, we're doing our part, and we're, people can see that, we've completed Cottageville Park, and I think this is a standalone. And I know it might be slightly more expensive to bid them, but I think it's worth it.
Is there any value though in waiting at all? Because what my understanding is right now, we're doing all of it at the same time without coordinating, and right now. So we wouldn't be waiting for a lattice on anything.
So I guess what I would note is for this particular action, we'd have to do this review no matter what, and so it's timely to do it now. If there is, if the board does decide that they're getting antsy and wants to move forward, we'd come back with a separate action to basically break out the gateway parcel as a separate construction document that could be bid. So I think your point's taken, and that's, I guess a conversation that the board could have, and I think either way, we'd probably be best served getting this structural review done now, so that we would be ready to go either with the rest of the Lattice development or as a standalone Cottageville Park bid.
Okay, I see the logic in that, but I want the discussion left on the table for moving ahead with the Cottageville completion, so that we can not miss the construction season next summer. It's not dependent on the weather. It doesn't have to be done in the winter or anything like that. So we could catch the next summer's construction season. I forget the budget, but it's a big enough project to be standalone. It's not a minor little deal. So thank you.
Yep. So this is really sort of a discussion item embedded within this. Again, no action needs to be taken, but we would just be looking for some additional guidance. Like I said, it's timely since we're talking about the pergola this evening. The board had discussed and showed interest in having some sort of depiction of the watershed as part of the pergola structure. One of the initial options had been LED lights in the shape of the watershed kind of attached to the top of the pergola, but I think the board rightly pointed out, even though it looked very interesting visually, that it's probably just an attractive nuisance and people would be standing on the swing benches to pull the lights down. So a more durable option was some sort of engraving into the pavement of the watershed. Damon Farber, the landscape architect sub-consultants, had initially proposed sandblasting. And the board, I think expressed interest in the design, but had some concerns about maintenance and longevity. And when we spoke with our partners at Hopkins, who are going to be maintaining at least a large portion of the Cottageville site, they also expressed interest in the design, but had some concerns about longevity of sandblasting. So we went back to work with our landscape architects to make sure that they had sort of exhausted other ideas for pavement treatment, and asked them to look at a few different options, which I'll present in just a moment. I did want to note that we've been having ongoing discussions with Hopkins about operations and maintenance, and they've suggested that this particular feature is probably something that they would want the district to not do day-to-day maintenance on, like snow removal, but do any sort of repair in the future. So they basically would like the district to choose the materials and treatment that we think fits our vision for durability. the best. So just to have that for some additional context as we have our discussion. We asked Damon Farber to put together 3 or 4 options, and then it's a little bit rough, but give us some sort of benchmarking on how much the initial installation is, both materials and labor, versus how durable each of these options are. And all of the costs are basically in terms of the baseline option, which was the sandblasting. So the top is what's in the current construction drawings. Sandblasting is cost effective for this whole decorative pavement area. It's about $34,000, about $40 to $50 per square foot. But it is, of these various options, the least durable, which basically means that as people walk over it over the years, or as snow removal equipment, probably in this case shovels, are used, some of the design could be start to be rubbed out. We did press them on if there's ways to make this more durable, and they noted that they typically add a sealant to it. They also have various techniques to kind of make the design higher contrast and pop out. So they embed aggregate into the cement. So as they sandblast, there's a darker color that comes through. So they're still quite confident that sandblasting would look great and last for a number of years without needing any repairs, and that even as it starts to fade a little bit, that it would still the outline would still be apparent and people would understand what the design is of. Sort of moving up in cost is an option for engraved precast pavers. So this is the idea of rather than pouring concrete and then sandblasting, you'd be engraving into a slightly more durable material, but it is about twice as expensive as the sandblasting option. Finally, the sort of the gold-plated option is engraving granite, which can last 50 or 100 years. That's what major monuments often would use. But this is about 3 times as expensive as the sandblasting option. And at some point it would require re-engraving, but the granite itself is extremely long-lasting. And then a final option, just we're asking them to kind of think creatively. They had proposed you could actually use different colored pavers to lay out the design. And so this kind of has like a pixelated digital look to it. Each paver, would be laid. And so it's definitely a bit more abstract. And we had talked about the idea we might need some sort of panel sign to, have a more realistic depiction of the watershed so people fully understood what it is. There still is the option of engraving place names and labels into all of these, which was something that the board had asked about so that someone could kind of point to, Grays Bay Dam or some of the major bays in Lake Minnetonka. So these were, just different options that Damon Farber said that they believe would all work well here. They just come at a different cost. This option is about the same cost actually as the sandblasting. And they expressed confidence that all of these would be good, and they'll do some in-field testing of the sandblasting to make sure that it's looking good before they do the entire stretch of it. So they do have ways of working with the actual installers to make sure that it's going to look like it does in the drawings. So that's sort of just to lay out kind of what the options are. We'll come back and talk about that. I did want to jump back to the contract amendment for structural engineering services and see if the board had any questions or discussion on that before tackling the pavement.
I have one quick question on the HDR design contract. What was the original amount and the First Amendment amount?
So the original, I think the original contract for design services was around, I would want to look it up exactly to have these numbers. Was around 400,000, I believe. And the second phase was around 700,000. That's all give or take. Those are round numbers, but that's ballpark what the two phases were.
And then this gets us to 100% design.
That's the idea, that this would be, and we did press them, that this is, we're about to hit 100%, and so any other structural analysis that's needed, please roll this into a single request so that the board can consider it once and know that we're getting to the construction documents with this. And they went through, this is the only sort of, besides the pond, which is structural, but that's something that their lead engineers have been working on. They're sort of, the primary engineers working on the project are the water resource engineers, so that's all set. They calculated all the loads on that. This is something that's, as I said, designed by a landscape architect, but does typically need an engineer review. And since this wasn't, this particular feature wasn't scoped, as part of phase 1 or phase 2,
Yep.
they've noted that this is the only thing that they could think of that still needs to be done.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for staff? Oh, Mr. Handy.
Is this a wood construction or metal?
This is metal.
Metal.
Manager Loftus, just to address Manager Miller's question earlier too, I think Gabe and I had talked recently, and I think there's sort of a logical progression where we could think about breaking off this parcel as well. So we've been working closely with Hopkins on a new cooperative agreement, and that cooperative agreement is going to encapsulate all of Cottageville Park now. The present cooperative agreement is just for the main portion of Cottageville Park. So the new agreement will have the main park plus this parcel and the nature play area. And as part of that process, we're scheduled to present, and one aspect of, I should say, the original cooperative agreement and the new one is the city approves the park design because they're going to take some maintenance obligations. So we're presently scheduled to go to the Park Commission late February and then to the City Council in early March. We would come back to the board then for approval of that cooperative agreement, most likely late March. And I think that would be a good time to have a discussion around
Good.
phasing and potentially breaking off of one of the components, because we will be at 100% design and have those agreements fully fleshed out.
Can we take care of the
One
amendment? Yep.
One question. The three different options on the watershed map, there's no additional engineering or architectural costs for any one of them, or they all the same price?
As far as designing them, that's all the same price. It's the capital cost for
Okay.
installation that has a price tag difference.
Okay. Move approval.
Second, all right. Vote on amending the design contract. Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
Manager Hejmati?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Sando?
All right.
Loftus, aye. Passes 5-0. And then you want to go back to your design
Yeah, if we
discussion?
could just get,
Yep.
whether or not it's sort of, I don't know if there's unanimous or kind of a direction that the board wishes to go, or if there's any specific questions that we haven't addressed that the board would need to kind of give us guidance. We could always reconvene the design liaison group and bring back additional information to help guide this decision. So either if there's a preferred direction or additional questions would be extremely helpful at this point.
My initial reaction to it was I was surprised it covered that whole pergola area. I guess in my mind, I wasn't, I guess, envisioning that when we talked about it.
Okay.
I'm not sure why, not that that's right or wrong, but I just thought it was gonna be either on the wall here, on the ends, or on the ground, like right here. But I guess there could be value in stretching it out, but, I mean, there'll be swings hanging above it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if the idea, it's fun to find where you are and where so-and-so lives on the map. It's kind of fun, and it obviously gives you nice context of what the watershed is, but
Yep.
I guess I didn't envision the scale, I guess.
I can, yeah, and so I guess just to help put this into perspective, two things. One is there was an option that was presented that had, is basically metal
Yeah.
cutouts on
Yep.
the side. This one, I think this was the direction that we had decided to go. And as
Yeah.
far as scale, this whole area is about 650 square feet.
Okay,
So it's large, but it's not massive.
Okay.
And so, you know, only doing a small portion of it it'd be
Would
quite
yeah,
small.
look odd, okay.
I think as it is, I'm not sure how long or how large any single portion of this, but it's about big enough that you could have sort of some labels that are legible. So I think the size on this is kind of, and this is, I think, the reason that Damon Farber proposed this. The size works pretty well. I mean, you can see that part of Lake Minnetonka still, the very edges gets cut off, so it remains a little bit abstract. And so, you know, if there is a desire for a sign somewhere, if we're worried about cutting off one of the municipalities or something, but
Yeah. What
This-
was the size on the wall gonna be? Like 6 wide, 6 high?
that seems a ballpark. It would, you know, it'd certainly be smaller.
Right.
And
And
it
it
would,
would be legible because it's a different medium. You're saying you can't put labels on concrete very easily or in small.
if it's much smaller, I think the font size would be so small that people wouldn't really be able to pick it out.
It's not like when we put our initials or handprints in the sidewalks, you can see those, but
Right. It's
this would be different.
You know, the thing that occurs to me is, I don't think anybody, I think they just, when they think of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, they think of Minnehaha Creek. They don't realize the watershed is so big and extends from St. Boniface to St. Paul and has parts of 29 cities in it. And I think people are really amazed when they see how big the district is. And I think anytime we get a chance to expose that, you know, we should. I think it's a big educational opportunity here.
Yeah.
And it's not just a graphic, you know, thing, but it's a huge informative opportunity. And I think because of the location, a lot more people are going to see it than any of the other opportunities we have to put a graphic up of this district and its size. And I'd even put more information on it, you know, I'd say how many square miles is 59 square miles, something like that?
Total watershed,
Yeah,
almost 180.
okay, 180 square miles and parts of 29 communities and how many lakes and streams. I think that's just, you know, just amazing numbers that people aren't just aware of, you know. And they don't even associate Minnetonka with the watershed.
And having it at your feet in a swing is more likely to entice you to keep looking versus having
Right.
to go to one of the ends and look at a
Right.
map, right?
And, you know, not to criticize the park out in Carver County, but that's, you know, it's well done, but it just, it doesn't, you know, and I think it's nice, but it doesn't tell the story the same way that something like this would, where, you know, that's abstract, you know, have to kind of figure it out, and, you know, it's well done, but it's not as, doesn't provide the same opportunity this would.
And to that point, I will, as far as kind of showing the full scope of the watershed district, they did, zoom out even a little bit further to make sure that the Mississippi River is picked up at the far end, so you do get the full
I like that.
from the west all the way
Yeah.
to where it empties. And I guess, just a question, if I may, to Manager Miller. Are you suggesting something that's a little bit more literal is the preference? So something that can actually be,
Yeah,
one of the options that can be engraved with the place names and labels rather than
Yeah,
sort of a,
yeah, put the copper
Yeah.
plates down or whatever, St. Boniface and then St. Paul or whatever, because I really
So
think.
not the pixel pavers, doesn't do that?
Yeah, it doesn't
So
do
that
it.
one's out. You
Uh,
prefer that one out?
Maybe I don't know if the rest of the board agrees with me, but I think this is a unique opportunity here for a lot of people to see this.
And this, and I agree with Manager Miller, and the scope of our area too, it's very impressive. And it's another education of the public.
Right.
What is the base, you've given added prices of 35,000 and
Yep.
75,000. What is the base price on the sandblasted concrete?
that would be about 35,000.
About
So-
35.
Yep, at the $40 to $50 per square foot,
Comes out,
it's 34,800.
Okay.
So when you see like the 35,000 add, that would be 70,000
doubling it.
total.
So doubles that.
Yep, exactly, and then the granite is an additional 75,000, so that about 3 times
Triples
base
it.
cost of.
About triples the base cost, okay.
More than triples it, yeah.
Yeah.
The trade-off is that it is highly durable, and so that's what we've been trying to understand is, over the long term, replacement frequency is much lower. We're not going to have someone coming in every 10 years to refresh the sandblasting, but granite is quite expensive, and there's other worries that if you did have to replace a panel, it'd have to come from the same quarry or have to be very carefully matched. So those are just since there is kind of a significant price swing between the different options, it did seem like something that we wanted to get further guidance from the board on before.
I think granite makes a lot of sense with statues and whatnot. Does it make sense on the ground?
It would, it would look, I think it would look visually striking, but that's not to say that, I think they have techniques with the sandblasting, as far as adding staining and using different types of aggregate underneath that, they have expressed confidence that they could also make that design stand out.
It would look, so they'd all look similar. It's just really the durability, probably.
Yeah, I think the precast pavers would probably would look the most different of these 3 options, just because, there'd be, they're smaller units, so there'd be a lot of kind of lines in between. We haven't detailed out if we went with granite, this particular size of the slabs, but it'd be larger than pavers, than concrete pavers.
Well, I think you definitely want something you can replace parts of every once in a while, because things will happen. Any other thoughts for staff on
And
what
like I said,
direction
we,
you wanna go?
and we're happy to revisit this at a design liaison meeting if, if the board needs more time to mull it over, but just wanted to, since this was something a few months ago that I know was asked to be brought back, to make sure we weren't jumping into a maintenance situation
Yeah.
that we hadn't considered.
I appreciate the creativity of the pixelated one. I appreciate the creative thought on that, but it doesn't sound like it'll meet everybody's needs, so. Is there an option for metal inlays? Or is that not?
As far as the full
Yeah.
design, something we could explore. I think parts of the design are fairly intricate, and
Okay.
so along Minnehaha Creek or some of the wetland areas, it's a little harder to keep that legible.
Sure.
But it's certainly something we could ask about.
You mean do one of those cutouts, but lay it down on the, huh, that's interesting. Should look at that
Okay.
also, in addition, I think it's good work, but, let's make sure it's the best.
Okay.
Any other opinions to share on this, or? Okay.
No, my only comments would be, a lot of those are salt, really hard on salt would be repaired. I like the granite house, I think maybe you could look at the, Jesse just said, the middle one that was encased in plastic, or like a plastic top. Or, the floor would be, then you could always change the plastic a lot cheaper than some of this other stuff.
Poor Billy wants to talk. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
One
Manager
last thought
Hitchman.
is, as we think about costs and all of these things we're thinking about, this project is a really remarkable project. This whole thing is a really remarkable project. And I think it's important that we not stint on some things that represent it adequately, really representing the quality of the work that's being done here. It's a really remarkable project. You're doing the creek, you're doing the building, you're integrating it with another park. If we're making a statement like that, we should think about, it's worth spending the money to do something that's really special.
Mhm.
Yes, it makes a statement, and it's gonna be there a long time.
Yes. It's going to become a destination, and it's already, in many ways, it's going to be a destination for the rest of the Twin Cities to see how this was put together. That is, we can manage water and we can produce building and also affordable housing and beauty and, all of those things.
And transit orientated.
Yes,
all that.
all of those things,
Doing
it's
it
like
all.
it'll become iconic. And if it's going to be iconic, then let's not stint. Let's do it right.
Thank you. I appreciate
Are
that.
we clear enough?
Clear enough for now. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks. We have a second action item, an authorization to execute a contract to conduct position classification and market compensation study. Mr. Whisker, thank you for walking us through this.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair White, managers, physically present and digital. As Chair Loftus mentioned, Resolution 2310 that is before you this evening would authorize the administrator, that's me, to execute a contract with Baker Tilly to complete a job classification and market compensation study in an amount not to exceed $36,700. And I don't have a sharp-looking PowerPoint like Gabe did. This is a little bit more dry, so I'm just going to step you through it verbally. For background for the board, following the strategic alignment plan that was developed in 2016, creating a direction for the organization, the board then worked with Springstead, now Baker Tilly, to actually develop a plan for a reorganizing the staff structure. And part of that process, as you can imagine, was developing a new organizational chart, mapping out what the jobs were or positions, drafting new job descriptions, and then we worked with Springstead, now Baker Tilly, to classify or grade those jobs out internally to create the hierarchy of positions within the organization. Once we had that done, those positions were then benchmarked for salary against the regional marketplace. And the board participated in defining what that market was, which peer organizations we wanted to measure ourselves against. Baker Tilly went out and collected all of the comparable pay information. So they talked to those organizations and gathered wage data about what they considered comparable positions, aggregated all that information, did a lot of math think they ran some regression analyses and developed a pay plan that was recommended to the board, and that pay plan came forward with a new compensation policy, which outlines this board's philosophy. It adopted the pay plan, and it identified how that pay plan would be maintained over time, and how, among other things, how we would place new employees within that system, and how we would consider advancement or penetration through the salary range for an individual job. And the reason I mention that is that policy calls for or recommends that we would retest the market every 5 years, and that would be this year, 2023. Now, since the Watershed District used Springstead or Baker Tilly last time to classify the jobs, and as part of that work, we used their proprietary system that they call SAFE, Systematic Analysis Factor Evaluation. I'm not completely sold on the acronym, it doesn't roll off the tongue, but that includes looking at 9 different ways to point out or grade jobs. It looks at, for a particular job, what kind of education is required, how much experience is needed, the level of work, how physically demanding the job is, field versus, I think my job's classified as sedentary, which I always took issue with. It looks at human relations, supervisory responsibilities, the working conditions, how much independence you have within the organization, and then how much impact or risk you assume and impact on the organization. And because we use that system, they're very familiar with our reorg, and this is really only our second time through. It was good, and we want to keep momentum. I am recommending that we use them again this time. While we're recommending Baker Tilly, have reached out and benchmarked against other firms who have provided ranges of costs that I think bracket and align with the $36,700 that's recommended here. Ranges from between $30,000 to just over $40,000 is what I have heard back from the ones that I've been in contact with. In